2 San Diego luxury properties, 56 years of built legacy, and a creditor ledger that leaves zero room for negotiation. Phil Mickelson is facing an aggressive, total asset recovery effort that targets the very foundations of his California footprint. Court filings reveal that the legal net is tightening rapidly, threatening homes that represent millions in high-value real estate. If you think this is just standard financial restructuring, you are missing the entire scope of what is unfolding behind closed doors. From my perspective, watching a career icon absorb this level of legal pressure changes how we view elite sports empires forever. Do you agree that these high-stakes financial collapses are completely changing the landscape, or is this just routine leverage? Drop your view in the comments below. If you are a golf fan who wants to track the real financial mechanics behind the legends, hit that subscribe button right now and smash the like factor so more fans find this breakdown. Now, let us get into it. Those 2 San Diego properties were once symbols of permanent sporting royalty, built during an era when every major victory turned straight into unassailable liquid wealth. Creditors are not looking at trophies or green jackets anymore. They are looking at title deeds, asset registries, and the cold reality of unpaid obligations coming due all at once. The legal papers filed in California courtrooms map out a systematic dismantling of holdings that took decades to accumulate. Behind the immaculate gates and pristine Pacific views, a quiet financial reckoning has crossed the line from private negotiation into open seizure territory. This is the exact point where elite status stops offering insulation against the mechanical execution of debt collection. That pressure would have broken ordinary portfolios years ago, but what happened next pushed the entire situation past the point of casual legal dispute. The calendar turned, but the financial obligations did not pause for tournament schedules or aging legacies. Legal teams representing the creditor side filed direct motions targeting the deeds themselves, moving past standard warnings straight into formal asset attachment proceedings. Court dockets in San Diego filled with lien notices, demand letters, and enforcement actions that left very little room for creative accounting. For decades, the public image was built on effortless high-rolling and untouchable golf dominance. Now, the physical footprint of that empire is being itemized by court-appointed evaluators and legal liquidators. The underlying debts involve staggering sums tied to private investments, leveraged loans, and high-stakes ventures that went entirely sideways when market conditions shifted against him. Observers who watched from the gallery saw only the trademark swagger on the course, completely unaware of the multi-million-dollar liabilities compounding quietly in the background. The architecture of this financial unraveling goes much deeper than a single set of mortgage defaults or a temporary cash flow squeeze. Creditor committees across multiple jurisdictions began comparing notes, mapping out every corporate entity and shell company tied to the player's personal portfolio. Every missed deadline on private promissory notes triggered cascading cross-defaults that sucked in independent lenders who had previously felt secure. When the primary residential notes were called in, the legal paperwork exposed a complex web of cross-collateralization that left zero financial wiggle room. Financial investigators poring over public registries discovered that the debt obligations stretched far beyond standard commercial lending into private high-interest arrangements designed to plug holes from previous speculative bets. Each new court filing added another layer of complexity, detailing how millions in circulating capital had vanished into troubled business ventures and failed real estate syndications. The sheer scale of the liability meant that standard restructuring proposals put forward by advisory teams were dismissed out of hand by institutional lenders holding the primary liens. The creditors knew exactly which levers to pull to maximize financial pain, yet the counter-strategy deployed behind closed doors only accelerated the timeline toward forced liquidation. Court transcripts and financial disclosures show a web of overlapping obligations that stretched across multiple banking institutions and private lenders. When the primary lines of credit froze, the secondary assets became the immediate target for forced recovery. San Diego real estate holdings, long considered safe havens insulated from tour fluctuations, turned into primary collateral under strict state enforcement laws. Legal experts point out that once a creditor secures an attachment order on primary residential deeds, Stopping the auction process requires immediate, massive liquidity that simply does not appear out of thin air. The narrative shifted rapidly from a private monetary dispute into a very public dismantling of a sporting icon's personal estate. Every motion filed by the legal teams brought the forced seizure timeline closer to reality, stripping away the buffers that usually protect high net worth individuals from public humiliation. Beyond the immediate banking pressures, secondary creditors emerged from the woodwork with uncollected judgments stemming from past business partnerships and failed enterprise ventures. These smaller claimants realized that if they did not move quickly to attach remaining equity, the primary institutional lenders would swallow every available square foot of the California properties. Legal maneuvers turned cutthroat as competing factions of debt holders filed emergency injunctions to secure priority positions on the title registry. The debtors' legal representation found themselves fighting fires on multiple fronts, responding to emergency hearings in different districts while trying to negotiate temporary stays that judges were increasingly unwilling to grant. The underlying friction revealed a complete breakdown of trust between the borrower and the financial institutions that had funded decades of luxury living. What started as a discreet collection effort metastasized into a public spectacle, broadcasting every missed payment and rejected settlement offer across national news feeds. That level of exposure would normally trigger an immediate settlement, but the legal maneuvering instead escalated into an all-out war over property titles. Industry insiders whispered about secret negotiations, but the court filings told a much harsher story of absolute refusal from the creditor side to grant extensions. Real estate registries in Southern California recorded multiple encumbrances placed simultaneously against both luxury locations, effectively freezing any attempt to sell or refinance independently. The strategy was clean, ruthless, and designed to corner the debtor with zero escape routes remaining. Wealth managers and financial analysts tracking the case noted that the sheer scale of the outstanding claims dwarfed normal restructuring thresholds. When a player of this stature faces court-mandated seizure on home turf, it sends shockwaves through the entire professional sports and investment community. The aura of invincibility vanished the moment federal and state judges began reviewing the attachment orders with strict, unyielding adherence to commercial debt law. The battle over the first San Diego property set a brutal legal precedent for how the second estate would be targeted under California Civil Code. While lawyers argued over valuation metrics and equitable distribution, court-appointed receivers moved swiftly to inventory the physical contents of the primary residence. Every luxury vehicle, piece of bespoke art, and high-end amenity housed within the gates was cataloged for potential separate liquidation. The emotional toll of watching decades of accumulated personal history subjected to a cold judicial inventory cannot be overstated, even for seasoned competitors accustomed to high-pressure environments. Creditor attorneys argued before the bench that the debtor's lifestyle choices demonstrated a willful disregard for ongoing repayment schedules, leaving the court with no alternative but to grant full control to the receivership team. Observers noted that the defense arguments lacked the aggressive pushback characteristic of earlier legal skirmishes, signaling a distinct fatigue within the inner circle. The legal battle lines were drawn deep into California property law, but the real damage was happening far away from the courtroom lights. Sponsorship revenue streams, once thought to be bottomless, faced sudden garnishment threats as corporate partners distanced themselves from the swirling litigation. The financial ecosystem surrounding a legendary golfer relies entirely on brand prestige and perceived liquidity. Once those pillars cracked under the weight of active default notices, the secondary market for his private assets dried up overnight. Creditors seized upon this vulnerability, arguing before the bench that further delays would only dissipate the remaining equity tied up in the San Diego estates. Legal briefs submitted by the plaintiff side detailed missed payment deadlines that stretched back across multiple quarters, proving that the default was systemic rather than a temporary cash flow hiccup. The defense tried desperately to argue procedural technicalities, but the sheer volume of paper trail made dismissal virtually impossible. Corporate boardrooms that once rushed to associate their logos with championship prestige now calculated the PR risk of maintaining financial ties to an embattled debtor. Brand ambassadors find themselves isolated when balance sheets turn toxic, and the corporate exodus drained the exact capital needed to service mounting legal retainers. Behind the scenes, talent agencies and business managers attempted to broker emergency endorsement deals in overseas markets where the domestic litigation footprint carried less weight. Those efforts stalled as international partners grew wary of potential third-party garnishment orders that could freeze funds across international borders. The liquidity crunch tightened into a chokehold, cutting off every alternate revenue pipeline that might have provided a lifeline to the beleaguered estate. That defense might have worked in a standard commercial dispute, yet the sheer velocity of the creditor onslaught left the legal team scrambling for traction. Public opinion in the golf world fractured immediately between loyalists defending past glory and cynical observers pointing out the inevitable consequences of reckless financial exposure. Social media feeds and sports talk circles buzzed with speculation about whether a sudden cash injection from exhibition circuits could halt the gavel. But cash matches and exhibition purses pale in comparison to tens of millions in structured debt judgments backed by court orders. The romantic notion of a Hollywood ending where the hero rides in to save his estate started looking less and less realistic with every passing docket entry. Financial journalists began publishing detailed breakdowns of the mortgages, showing how overlapping liens created a toxic financial puzzle that no single tournament win could ever solve. The second property, nestled further along the prime Southern California coastline, faced an entirely separate set of creditor claims originating from commercial real estate ventures initiated a decade prior. While the first property bore the brunt of immediate banking litigation, this secondary estate became the target of aggressive private equity firms holding defaulted promissory notes. The legal strategy here was designed to squeeze from both directions, ensuring that even if a miracle saved the primary residence, the second anchor point would fall under the hammer. Court filings revealed that this secondary parcel had been leveraged multiple times to secure bridge loans for speculative business startups that failed to generate expected returns. The cumulative effect of these overlapping claims created an impenetrable defensive barrier, rendering traditional refinancing completely impossible under current market interest rates. The numbers were brutal, cold, and entirely undeniable, although the final act of the property seizure drama had not yet reached its peak. As the court-mandated auction dates crept closer, emergency motions filled the local registry in a frantic attempt to buy breathing room. Judges, however, showed little patience for 11th-hour delays, unsupported by hard cash escrow deposits. The reality of age 56, sinking in both physically on the course and legally in the financial ledger, created a compounding sense of finality. This was no longer about preserving a lifestyle or protecting a brand. It was a pure exercise in asset stripping governed by rigid civil procedure. Fans who grew up watching the iconic swings and charismatic victories found themselves reading dry legal summaries about forced sales, sheriff auctions, and lien priorities. The contrast between the roaring galleries of yesteryear and the quiet, sterile atmosphere of a civil debt court could not have been more absolute. Attention shifted temporarily to how other sporting legends navigated similar financial precipices, drawing sharp parallels to historical cases where lavish spending outlasted competitive earning power. Analysts on sports talk networks debated whether the culture of high-stakes gambling and aggressive private equity investment created an inevitable trap for athletes transitioning out of their prime winning years. Yet none of those historical comparisons softened the blow of the unfolding San Diego disaster, which played out with public brutality in local county records. Every hearing was open to the press, exposing intimate details of personal banking statements, outstanding tax liabilities, and defaulted personal loans to global scrutiny. The dignity traditionally afforded to veteran champions evaporated under the glare of mandatory financial disclosures required by the bankruptcy and civil courts. That stark reality defined the closing chapters of the San Diego property saga, driven by a single calculated purpose from the creditor side: total recovery. Appellate courts repeatedly refused to issue stays on the attachment orders, citing clear evidence of default and lack of adequate alternative collateral. The two luxury properties, once symbols of unbridled success and coastal luxury, transformed into literal bargaining chips in a high-stakes game of financial survival. Experts on high net worth asset protection noted that once creditors successfully pierce the primary real estate shield, the rest of the portfolio usually unravels with terrifying speed. The emotional weight of losing homes tied to decades of personal history added a deeply human layer to what was otherwise a cold exercise in accounting and debt collection. Observers waited for a white knight investor to step forward with a rescue package, but the sheer toxicity of the combined liabilities kept potential buyers far away from the negotiating table. The psychological toll on the debtor's immediate circle became a talking point among insiders who watched the unraveling from a distance. Family members and longtime associates found themselves fielding calls from investigative reporters seeking comments on leaked asset valuation reports and impending foreclosure dates. The protective bubble that shields elite athletes from mundane economic realities popped completely, leaving them exposed to the same statutory collection laws faced by ordinary citizens. Legal counsel advised complete silence, but the absence of public statements only fueled wild speculation across digital fan forums and industry blogs. Rumors regarding private asset sales in foreign jurisdictions circulated constantly, though no verified transactions ever surfaced to alter the bleak trajectory of the California court dockets. The waiting game finally expired when the judge signed the definitive writ of execution, authorizing the county sheriff to take physical and legal control of the premises. That signature cleared the final hurdle for scheduled public auction. The legal fortifications that had guarded the estates for years crumbled under the weight of unpayable judgments and rejected settlement offers. For a generation of fans who viewed sporting legends as immortal beings untouched by mundane economic gravity, the sight of foreclosure notices served as a jarring wake-up call. The financial empire built on green turf and lucrative contracts was systematically dismantled down to the bare concrete foundations. Questions lingered about how such massive wealth could evaporate into a maze of distressed assets and aggressive creditor litigation. Local authorities established protocols for the upcoming physical handover, ensuring that court-appointed receivers could access the grounds without interference from private security personnel. Real estate brokers across the region began preparing valuation prospectuses for potential institutional buyers, salivating over the prospect of acquiring premier Southern California coastal acreage at distressed prices. The irony of titans of industry and sports losing their crown jewels to institutional creditors served as a stark reminder of the volatility inherent in unhedged, leveraged wealth. Every piece of custom interior work, an architectural marvel designed to reflect a championship lifestyle, was recontextualized as mere collateral on a spreadsheet. That lingering question hangs over every legacy built on high-risk leverage and sporting fame. And the final chapter of how these San Diego properties are stripped away completely unfolds right now. The official appraisal values submitted to the court set the baseline for the upcoming forced liquidation sales, guaranteeing pennies on the dollar compared to their peak market worth. Creditor representatives confirmed that all proceeds from the auctions will be applied directly to the principal balances, leaving virtually no surplus for the debtor's estate. Legal precedents established by these filings now serve as a cautionary tale across professional sports leagues regarding the dangers of unmonitored private debt exposure. As the final keys are handed over to court-appointed receivers, the era of untouchable celebrity real estate in Southern California comes to a sudden and unceremonious halt. The legacy remains etched in golf history books, but the physical monuments of that success belong to the ledger now. The final accounting submitted by the court receiver itemized every single dollar recovered from the forced sale of the two San Diego luxury properties, closing the book on an extraordinary chapter of modern sports finance. Creditor ledgers were formally updated to reflect partial satisfaction of the massive debt judgments, though substantial deficiencies remained outstanding across other commercial portfolios. Legal scholars will study these proceedings for decades as a masterclass in aggressive asset attachment and the limits of high net worth shielding under California law. For the broader sporting world, the lesson is clear and unyielding. No matter how many historic victories populate a career resume, the math of unmanaged leverage always collects in full. Every storyline that came out of this San Diego financial collapse, the aggressive creditor filings, the crumbling real estate empire, the unyielding court rulings, follows this series directly into the next inevitable fallout. Nothing is resolved. Everything is escalating. If you made it to the end of this video, You already know this channel covers golf the way it deserves to be covered. No fluff, no filler, just the real story. If you are not subscribed yet, do it right now. Leave a comment below telling us whether you think elite athletes should be held to stricter financial accountability or if this creditor crackdown crossed the line.